Hi everyone, really good to see you there. Really happy to be able to be with you for half an hour. I'll tell you what, I've already changed the subject of what I'm going to talk about. I was going to talk about resilience, and I was kind of intrigued by an answer to a question that Des gave or asked as to what would you do if you were attracted to somebody, and what would you do to get their attention? And I think Des's answer was great, wasn't it? I mean, this idea of taking a picture and then asking them to send it to you and so on. I thought that was really clever. Helping somebody with a suitcase, fair enough. But I was wondering, why wouldn't the answer be, we'll just walk up and talk to them? And for the lady, of course, Des says fear. And for the ladies, why wouldn't the answer be, well, you just smile at him? And that's all, as Des just said from the back of the room. You may not have heard him. It's all about fear. It took me back to my 20s, which is a little while ago now, as you can probably tell. And that was where I was. You know, I actually looked at a photograph of myself in my 20s recently, and I thought, oh my God, yeah, that guy looks okay. And he seemed to be in reasonable shape. And yeah, I went through my 20s missing all these opportunities. Absolutely amazing. All to do with lack of confidence, all to do with fear. And I look back at it now, and I could think, of course, oh, what a shame. You know, what are all those opportunities I missed? Why wasn't I more confident, and why wasn't I much more get up and go about relationships? And of course, it would be easy to say that, but that's who I was. Okay, that's just who I was. And it wasn't until my late 20s that I got some fantastic advice as to how to break through that, and I want to tell you about it because it changed my life. And by the way, that kind of lack of confidence and fear and all these anxiety and all those things, it didn't just reflect itself in relationships. By the way, it didn't affect me at work. I was doing pretty well in the corporate world, and my career was going well. But in my job in the corporate world, I had to do what I'm doing now, give presentations, and guess what? That used to make me very anxious. Right through my 20s, I suffered from anxiety presenting to groups. And it was cracking that started my move into becoming a lot more confident. And I can tell you, in the area of relationships, I did a lot of catching up in my early 30s, and it was a lot of fun. So what happened? I met this. By the way, let me ask this. This is a really interesting thing to know. Please put your hand up to either to yes or no to this question. How many of you would be comfortable coming up here, talking about something you know about to a group like this? How many of you would be comfortable? I know all the people around the outside would, because they're all the speakers. So it's about 7 or 8 of you, I think I counted. So am I right? Put your hand up if you would not be comfortable doing what I'm doing now. Okay, some of you haven't put your hand up at all, and I assume therefore you're in the second group. So interesting, isn't it, that anxiety by the way, as a psychologist, I can tell you that anxiety speaking to groups is by far and away the most common anxiety in the world. It's more common than anxiety about spiders or heights or even death. Surveys that have been done, even in America, by the way, come out with the answer that people would rather die than do what I'm doing now and get up and speak to a group. And that is amazing. It's true in every country in the world. Anxiety speaking to groups is by far and away the most common and biggest anxiety. And it's interesting, isn't it, to kind of think you can have a conversation with an individual, no problem at all. But as soon as you replace that individual with a group, it suddenly becomes scary. And it's interesting to think why that is. Does anyone have any idea, by the way, of what primarily is driving anxiety speaking to groups? Do you think it's being self-conscious? Do you think it's thinking the audience won't think much of you? Do you think, by the way, I'm going to bring this back to relationships, not surprisingly, do you think it's thinking that people won't think much of what you're saying or so on? No, that's not the primary drive at all. It's none of those things. The most common thing that drives anxiety speaking to groups is very simply being anxious about being anxious.
It's true, though.
So people don't like being anxious, you know. They don't like it at all. And in fact, if they're about to get, this is me back in my 20s, if I'm about to get up and speak to a group and I notice I'm getting anxious, and what are the thoughts that are going through my mind back then? oh my God, here we go again, I'm getting anxious, this is terrible. What if it gets worse while I'm speaking to the group? What if it affects my delivery? What if people notice? All these things going through my mind, desperately not wanting to be anxious. So what do you think it was that somebody told me to break through that problem? This is the most valuable thing you need to know about changing any psychological problem. And anxiety, speaking to groups, is just a psychological problem, isn't it? Like any other psychological problem. She said to me, stop resisting anxiety. So what did she mean by that? She meant all these thoughts you're having when you're about to get up and do a presentation at work, all these thoughts about desperately not wanting to be anxious, what do you think they're doing? They're making you anxious. Does that make sense? The anxiety you experience speaking to groups is 90% about being anxious about being anxious. So she said, stop resisting anxiety. That was an amazing piece of advice. So what did I do the next time I got up? Noticed I was getting anxious and said to myself, that's absolutely fine. After all, I had some evidence to back it up that it was absolutely fine. I'd managed to get through other presentations before, had I not, even though I was anxious. So I started accepting anxiety. This also happens to be the answer to your lack of confidence in creating relationships. Just accept the fear. Stop resisting it. Be okay with being fearful. Be okay with being anxious. After all, do you think anxiety ever harmed anyone? Not at all. By the way, do you think any feeling ever harmed anyone? Not at all. Nobody's ever been harmed by a feeling, ever. Anxiety is harmless. Feeling low or depressed is harmful. By the way, what you do when you're low or depressed might harm you. People do jump off tall buildings occasionally. That's harmful. But being depressed, totally harmless. Feeling depressed, rather, totally harmless. Feeling anxious, harmless. Feeling angry, harmless. Even feeling cold. Do you think that could harm you? Cold, being cold can kill you. Feeling cold is totally harmless. It's just a messaging system, isn't it? From the body to the brain, telling the brain you've got a problem. It is harmless. Nobody's ever been harmed by feeling, remember that. So what I want to encourage you to do is practice accepting every feeling. After all, it's not harming you. Do you think it's bearable? Every feeling is bearable. There's not a single feeling that's not bearable. I deal with people with panic attacks, totally bearable. The only feeling that's unbearable is extreme pain, probably under torture. That's not bearable, but everything else is. So if you want to know whether you're having a feeling that's unbearable, anxiety or you know, not being willing to walk up to somebody that you like the look of and say hi and talk to them, no, it's totally bearable. If the ladies among the audience can bear the pain of having children, then yes, you can bear any feeling. Of course you can. By the way, guys, they even come back for more. So no. So if feelings aren't harming you, can bear them. Therefore, why do you have to do anything about them? Let them be there. So if you're feeling anxious and you're wanting to walk up to somebody and talk to them because you like the look of them, just be willing to let the anxiety be there and do it anyway. What do you think happens if you allow your feelings to determine your behavior? What do you think happens if you're anxious and that prevents you from walking up to somebody and speaking to them? What do you think if you're having a desire for a cream bun and you eat it? What do you think that does to your desire for cream buns? What do you think doing what a feeling is telling you to do always does to the feeling? It always, without exception, reinforces the unconscious beliefs that are driving that feeling. There is not a single exception to that rule. If you're allowing anxiety to hold you back, what you're doing is reinforcing the unconscious beliefs that are driving that anxiety. Every single time you do it, you're reinforcing the problem. What do you think you'd need to do to unwind anxiety? Just do it. And not just do it, accept the anxiety. I get lots of people who have come to me who have heard about, do the thing you're afraid of. Susan Jeffers wrote a book, didn't she? Feel the fear and do it anyway. So I've had lots of clients come to me, for instance, there was one recently who'd been on a fear of flying course. What did BA tell them to do? Just do it. Go flying. This woman had to go flying as part of her job. So yes, she flew, but she was still just as panicky. She was still just as anxious. What nobody had told her to do, because BA doesn't know about this, is to accept the anxiety. be willing to be anxious. What was she doing? Walking up to the plane, noticing the anxiety coming on, feeling really bad about it because she knew she'd get on the plane and probably end up in a panic attack, coffee would start flying everywhere and so on. She was terrified of being anxious. Does that make sense? She needed to accept the anxiety. I taught her how to do that. She flew the next day. She lost her fear of flying within 2 weeks. So accept any feeling you're having. If you want to unwind it, if you want to unwind anxiety, we've already said, do the opposite of what the feeling is telling you to do. That's unique. That's universal, by the way, absolutely universal. You want to undo any recurring feeling, whether it's depression, anxiety, cravings, desire for nicotine, cravings for nicotine, whatever. Accept the feeling, do the opposite, keep doing it. And that will cure you. Took me a few weeks after 8 years of anxiety speaking to groups. Took me a few weeks to unwind it. Oh, by the way, was accepting the anxiety enough? No, that diminished it. Okay, next time you're having to speak to a group for any reason, totally accept the feeling, be willing to let it be there. You'll notice it will diminish straight away. No question. Straight away, it will diminish. But what's the other thing you have to do to unwind the beliefs, the unconscious beliefs driving your anxiety? Keep doing it. Find more opportunities to speak to groups. Join Toastmasters. Now, if we're getting back to confidence in the area of relationships, what is driving lack of confidence? It's always unconscious beliefs, okay? It doesn't matter what they are, they're driving your lack of confidence. What do you need to do to change those beliefs? What do you need to do to become hugely confident? You've heard how I started the process by conquering anxiety speaking to groups. What did I then do? I just started applying it to every area of my life, particularly the one that I started speaking about. Okay, I started just going overboard, accepting the anxiety, walking up to ladies and speaking to them. In fact, I decided to challenge myself to the extent of doing that on underground trains. Do you think that was fearful? For a guy in his late 20s who's unconfident and nervous in that area? Absolutely. What did I do with the fear? Allowed it to be there, totally accepted it, walk up to the lady, start speaking to her. I totally unwound my lack of confidence in the area of relationships in a matter of a couple of months, doing lots of that. I recommend to you guys, never hold back, because every single time you hold back, you are reinforcing the unconscious beliefs that are driving your fear of walking up to a woman and talking to her. Ladies, if you're reticent to smile at the guy you like the look of, do the same thing. Just do it and accept any nervousness or reticence you've got around it. And you will break through it and you will start to become more confident. Guys, I'm serious, by the way, with what I said about building confidence. Join Toastmasters. It's an amazing organization. Some of you will already have been to it. It's a fantastic place to build confidence. Why? Because it's a safe place to do all this stuff in front of groups. I see speakers who, have been speaking for a long time and still are not that confident doing it. And I think, well, they ought to get to Toastmasters. Why? Because they can play with the space. It's a place that's totally safe to express yourself, to do things way beyond what you feel comfortable doing. And what will that do? It'll change your mindset. It'll change the unconscious beliefs. It'll make you more confident. By the way, this whole area of changing mindset, of making yourself more confident, which is what I've chosen to talk about, there's so much research gone into it. And some of you may think that self-talk would be a good way of achieving that. There's lots of workshops you can go to where they teach you things like affirmations and visualizations and get you through exercises. NLP's got quite a lot in it. Exercises to kind of, tell yourself that you're going to become this and you're going to become that. The research says, no, that's helpful, don't get me wrong, it's helpful, but no, it is not the primary way to change self-belief. It is not the primary way to change your mindset. The way to change self-belief and mindset is through behavior. Every time you do the opposite of what your mind is telling you to do, you are unwinding the unconscious beliefs that are driving your mindset and you're replacing them with powerful beliefs. Keep acting in ways that you don't feel comfortable acting. You will change your mindset. You will change your confidence. It is dramatically effective. There's a tool we use called acting as if. That simply means imagine you're somebody that you admire who's got the mindset that you want to develop. Okay, in the area of business, it might be somebody like Richard Branson. Imagine you're that person. Do what you think they would be doing and accept any reticence or uncomfortable feelings that may give you. You will powerfully generate a more powerful mindset and self-belief, and it works very quickly. Sometimes that tool, act as if, is called fake it till you make it. Have you heard of that expression? It's the same thing. If you want to see some of the research behind it, have a look at a TED Talk. You all know what TED Talks are? If you don't, put TED Talk into the internet, you'll soon find out. And when you put TED, all you have to do is put TED into Google with the name Amy, A-M-Y, watch that talk. You'll see the research that backs up what I'm telling you, and then you'll see Amy. They're 15-minute talks about it. It won't take much of your time. TED, Amy in Google, you'll see the talk. She's amazing. And she not only gives you the research and the evidence for what she's telling you, she then gives you her own experience. How many people have seen Amy talk on TED? Just 4 of you. Okay, you need to watch this. Okay, she's telling you why and how you need to fake it till you make it. And then she's giving a demonstration of how it massively changed her life. She got the biggest standing ovation I've ever seen in a TED Talk. It was so powerful. Everyone in this room needs to watch it. The other thing I suggest you might be interested in doing is coming along to this free webinar that I ran that Des told you about, and it teaches something called Paxceptance. Nobody in this room who hasn't done my training would have any idea what the term Paxceptance means. You really need to know. You really ought to know what it means, and you ought to be practicing it every single day in your life. By the way, that talk also mentions accepting feelings, so you'll get a little bit of duplication of what I've already told you. But it teaches you some other powerful tools that you absolutely should be using in your life, every single one of you. So you'd be very welcome to just take a flyer, register, and come to that free webinar to hear those things. So I've said all I'm going to say about building mindset, becoming more powerful, building confidence. By the way, it changed my life so dramatically in such a short time that in the space of 3 months, from hearing this lady give me the piece of advice that I've just given you, okay, about accepting feelings when I was talking to groups, everything took off so rapidly. 3 months later, I was on stage in front of an audience of 1,000 people entertaining them. So 3 months it took me to turn my life around. So I simply want to say that you must do this. If confidence is holding you back in the area of relationships or in any other area of your life, then you must do the things that I've suggested you do. Join Toastmasters if you want. Start using the tool. Come along to this webinar, which will teach you more about it, and start moving your life forward dramatically. By the way, do I have regrets when I think about how I missed out on all those opportunities in my 20s through lack of confidence? Think I have regrets at all? Absolutely not. Let me tell you quickly why. By the way, who heard me give this talk at Des's previous conference? Only 3 of you. Is it all right if I talk about the same subject again? Yeah? I want to tell you something that will surprise you. As the 3 people who heard me talk about it will have been surprised, I assume, when I talked about it before. But I want to tell you this. It's a truth about life, a truth that you probably have never heard. You live, I live, we all live in what we call a determined world. How many of you know what that means? We live in a totally determined world. 1. Is it because you heard me talk at the next? Yes, it is. Okay, so this will shock you. What does that mean, that we live in a determined world? It means everything that's ever happened in our lives, everything we've ever done, everything other people have done to us, is the only thing that could possibly have happened. There is no way that anything you've ever done or anyone else has ever done to you could possibly have been different. you think if I explain to you why that is, it might remove regret and self-blame from your life? Think about it. If you knew that everything you've ever done in your life was unquestionably the only thing you could have done, why would you ever regret anything? Does that make sense? So I know, before I tell you why this is true, I know when I look at that picture of myself in my 20s and realize that no, I didn't walk up to women, and I can remember specific instances, by the way, where there were opportunities to, and I didn't do it because I didn't have the confidence to do it. I know without any question at all that I couldn't possibly have done it. Do you want to know why? Okay. Everything we do, every single thing we've ever done in our lives, true of you, me, and everyone else, has two causes. There's only two things that determined everything you've ever done. One, of course, is the situation you were in. That has a big influence on what we do. Yeah, we tend to respond to situations that we're in. The only other thing that determines what we've done at every single moment in our lives is who we were at that moment. What do I mean by who we were at that moment? I mean everything that made us who we were. Our attitudes, our beliefs, our ways of thinking, our knowledge and abilities, our strengths and weaknesses, our unconscious programming, which I've already talked about because unconscious beliefs drive a lot of our behavior and a lot of our thinking. You were, at every moment in your life, the person you were at that moment. And I can tell you that what you did was totally determined by who you were at that moment. And a couple more things I should tell you. One is, you're probably thinking, this sounds pretty crazy, because surely we are who we are at any moment, but we have a choice about what we do we not? We have choices. We make choices all the time. We make hundreds of choices all the time. Do you think I chose not to walk up to the woman I fancied when I was 25 years old? Yeah, I made that choice. The point is not that we make choices, because we surely do. The question is, why do we make the choices we make? Why did I choose not to walk up to her and talk to her? Because of who I was at that moment. Because of everything that made me who I was at that moment. My unconscious beliefs that were driving the fear, my abilities, my knowledge, my ways of thinking, my attitudes, my beliefs, my morals, everything. There hasn't been a single moment in your life where the choice you made could have been different, given who you were. Not one. What I'm telling you is something that philosophers know a great deal about and have talked about for a long time. Interestingly, they tend to keep it to themselves. When I asked a philosopher why they don't spread this knowledge around the population, the answer was very simple. Well, no, he gave me three answers, actually. The very first guy I spoke to hundreds of philosophers about this, but they all know about it. But when I said to the first one when I was about 29 years old, I said, why don't you talk about this stuff? It seems obvious to me now that you've told me. Why doesn't everyone know about it? He said, I'll give you three reasons. He says, one, that they'll think we're totally stupid if we come out and say everything that everyone has ever done is the only thing they could have done. Well, I'm telling you, I don't know whether you think I'm stupid, you might do, but I don't have any problem with that. So I found that a rather weak excuse. The second excuse was much more significant. He said, if we tell people that everything they've ever done is the only thing they could have done, then people who've done bad things would be copping out, wouldn't they? It would be a great cop-out for people who've committed crimes or done bad things or been unpleasant to people. He said you'd have bank robbers walking into court with their philosopher on their arm, saying to the judge, listen to this guy, Your Honor, he'll tell you robbing the bank was the only thing I could have done. By the way, can you see, given what I've told you, why it's true that robbing the bank was the only thing he could have done? He had a bank robber's mindset. Does that make sense? The choice he made was totally driven by who he was at that moment. No question at all, he could not possibly have not robbed that bank. So he would tell the judge that, and he'd say, listen to the philosopher, he'll tell you. And then he said, we don't want that happening. We don't want people sort of creating a cop-out for themselves for all the bad things they've ever done, all the selfish things they've ever done, and so on. And I went away and went back to him a week later because I thought a great deal about it, and I said, I don't agree with you. I said, first of all, I've spent a week knowing that everything I've ever done is the only thing I could have done in my life has changed in that week. Does that make sense? Every regret I'd ever had disappeared. What I just told you about not talking to the ladies in my 20s totally cleaned up. Every single self-blame, regret, bad thought that I'd had about what I'd done disappeared in that week. Absolutely amazing. And I said to him, I don't agree with you that it's a cop-out, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm still responsible. And he said, what does that mean if it's the only thing you could have done? I said, what it means is that I'm responsible for what I do now forward in relation to the crazy things that I might have done in the past. That changed my life too. Because now I knew that everything I'd done, however weak or questionable, was cleaned up instantly, but I was now taking responsibility for changing the person that allowed me to do that. Does that make sense? Let's face it, the past can't be changed anyway. So I'm giving you a powerful reason to accept it. Yeah, do not blame yourself or feel bad about any opportunity you've ever missed out on. It's the only thing you could possibly have done. Just take this opportunity, given what I've told you about building confidence, to change your life now forward. It's too late to change what's happened. And now I've told you that what's happened is the only thing that could have happened. So feel okay about it. Let go of all the bad thoughts that you've had about it. This is absolutely true. If I had more time, I would convince every single one of you in this room that what I've told you about the determined world is completely true. So use it, let go of the past, and now change who you are to have an amazing future. So that's what I did. He acknowledged what I told him. He said, but it's still going to be difficult, isn't it? Going out and trying to tell people all these things you're now saying so that they don't use it as a cop-out. I said, I don't agree with you. I've been telling people ever since. So I've told tens of thousands of people that the past could not have been different, so totally accept it. By the way, anything that anyone's ever done to you, parents of your boyfriend, only thing they could have done. Given who they were, they could not possibly have said or done anything different to what they said or did. They would have had to have been a slightly different person. True of everyone. The only way anyone could have made a different choice or done anything different is if they'd been a slightly different person. It was never possible. But take charge of the future. The philosopher said we don't apply this stuff to the future. He said the future's wide open. I totally agree with that. While it will be true at any moment, you'll be doing who you are determines what you do. That's true at any moment in the future, but it's up to you to change that. It's up to you to change who you are. It's up to you to make yourself more powerful, stronger, more capable, more resilient, using the tools that you hear other people speaking about today, about getting better relationships. Yes, you can change it all, but no, you could not have done that up till now. So, that's a pretty good reason to let go of the past in every single way. For anyone who's ever done anything to you that you're not happy about, I've given you a good reason to drop it and to take control of the future. I've given you some clues as to how you can change your mindset, how you can become stronger, how you can become more confident. In the area of other relationship tools, I sense I've got 8 minutes left. Does that make sense to anyone? If that's what this says, then I do. Okay, so let me just give you a couple more relationship tools. I do a lot of relationship work. I get couples coming to see me all the time who are having difficulties, and I can tell you how every one of those relationships starts when I see them. It's a bit like watching Wimbledon. You know, I'm sitting there and I'm watching him say what he's saying about what she's done, and she's saying what she's saying about what he's done, and I kind of watch it, and then I say stop. I say this. I want to tell you something that you may not have thought about. That both of you are absolutely right about everything you say, every opinion you have, and everything you've done. What do I mean by you're absolutely right? I mean every one of us believes we're right all the time, don't we? Every one of us, it doesn't matter what we do, what position we've got in a relationship, we always justify our position. Why? Because it is always right from our perspective. The thing that creates conflict, not only in relationships but worldwide, the thing that creates conflict is that people have different perspectives. They make themselves right from their perspective, but guess what? Do they spend much time trying to figure out the other person's perspective, or they just focus on their own perspective? The truth is the latter. When people are in conflict, they're only focusing on their perspective. They know they're right and reasonable, and from their perspective, of course, the other person is wrong and unreasonable. But guess what? The other person thinks the same thing. So what might be helpful in the couples counseling that I do, it might be helpful if for the first time they start to think more about the other person's perspective. They start to try to understand the other person's perspective. Do you think that might help? This is what I do with them. I say, I've listened to you for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is, talking about what the other person's done and how you're right and they're wrong. I said, no, nobody has the chance to mention that again unless you first describe it from the other person's perspective. Do you think that might take the wind out of their sails? Enormously. So now they're really in a bad situation because now they cannot say anything about the other person unless they describe it from the other person's perspective first. They run out of steam pretty quickly. So now they're starting to think about the other person's perspective and trying to understand it, and everything changes. So perspective is a significant tool in relationships. I don't buy the fact that you can't make relationships work. I do it all the time. People, of course, when they come to see me, their relationships are already in a bad way. Do I risk every one of them? No, of course not. Of course not. I quickly make up my mind that probably it's not going to work and they really need to separate. But most of the time, yeah, we do. We change it dramatically. Let me give you another tool to think about. When you're unhappy about what somebody else has done or said, let me tell you, that's not about them. It's about you. I don't mean that what they said or did isn't wrong in some way, but what I'm saying is that it's you that's thinking that. Let me give you an example. If I had a mouse phobia and a mouse suddenly ran across this stage, and I would be looking for a chair to leap up on. Okay, so let's think about what's happening. The mouse is a pretty harmless creature, isn't it? 4 legs and a lot of fur. And but what am I doing? I'm reacting to the mouse because I've got some programming in my mind that's making me react. Does that make sense? And then what I'm doing is I'm projecting that reaction onto the mouse. Does that make sense? So I think the mouse is the problem. Is the mouse the problem? No. Not at all. Every time somebody says or does something that you don't like, the same thing is happening. It's creating a reaction in you. The reaction it's creating in you is all about your programming. It's all about how you think, how you've learned to think, your beliefs, your ideas, your ways of thinking, your attitudes. Your mind is the one that's churning, and your mind is making the other person wrong. So what do you think might be a useful thing to do to break through, in my case, assuming I did have a mouse phobia, to break through my mouse phobia? Or what do you think might be useful to break through the upsets that we experience with what our partners do or say, or anyone else for that matter? It might be useful if we learn to recognize that it's 90% about the way we're thinking and 10% about what's happening out there. So what I'm saying is it's a really powerful thing to learn to own your reactions. Owning your reactions simply means recognizing that what's happening is going on in your head and what's happening out there. By the way, if you start owning your reactions and recognize what I'm just saying, do you think the fact that the world is determined might become relevant at this point? Do you think that it might be helpful to know that what your partner has just said or done, or anyone else that you're relating to for that matter, has just said or done the only thing they could possibly have said or done? There is no way that they could have said or done anything different. Why? Because the choice they made to say or do what they said or do was totally determined by who they were at that moment. Their ways of thinking, their attitudes, their beliefs, their morals, their values, their unconscious programming, their knowledge, their abilities, their strengths, their weaknesses, all move together to cause them to say or do what they said or did. There is no exception. So if you're having a challenging relationship with somebody right now, if you're in conflict with somebody right now, there's two things that would be useful for you to do. One would be to instantly own your reaction and recognize that your reaction is all about you. That calms you down. What happens to reactions when you own them? They die very quickly. Now you're getting a little bit more objective and able to face the situation that you're facing more objectively. What the other person has just said or done, without question, is the only thing they could have said or done in the situation they're in and given who they are at this moment. Do you think that might be helpful to know? Might perspective be a good thing to kick into at this point? Trying to understand why they said or did what they've said or did. You know it's the only thing they could have said or done. What drove it? What's their perspective? What's their view? What can you do? Once you've done all these three things, by the way, do you think things like compromise might start to become useful? Do you think looking for win-win situations might start to become useful? Absolutely. So I've just told you a few tools that I suggest you think about using in your life. If you want to know a whole lot more about how we make people incredibly powerful, incredibly resilient, and have amazing relationships, come to that free webinar. So back of the room, take a flyer, come to the free webinar, and then do the training that follows it, which, by the way, we now have a wealthy sponsor who's making this free to practically everyone. Because it changed his life, he wants everyone else to experience it. So pretty well nobody now is paying anything for this training. And you'll hear about that, of course, in the free introductory webinar. So come along, hear all about it, and hear about the opportunities that you've got. That's it. That's all I'm going to say.